Welcome. So glad you tuned in on Leap of Faith as we explore Ethos. Ethos is about the characteristic spirit of our Catholic culture. It is about trust, credibility, authority. We partner with the University of Dayton as we seek to explore critical issues of our church that help us to broaden our perspective and reimagine our faith. Take the leap with us. Explore the religious imagination. Welcome to Ethos. It is not just about one's own father and mother. It is about their generation and the generations before, whose leave-taking can also be slow and prolonged, creating a time and space of long-lasting coexistence with the other ages of life. In other words, it is about the old age of life. These wise words were spoken by one of the great sages of our time, Pope Francis. He is now 86 years old, and he highlighted there the importance of honoring the elderly. It was his reflections on the value of old age as part of the catechesis offered at the weekly papal audience at St. Peter's Square in June 2022. Now, on today's Ethos episode, we want to do just that, honor the elderly. So our theme is the season of aging, legacy, and spirituality. And to help us explore the wonders and beauty of aging and all that goes with facing the reality of this new dimension in life, we have a very vibrant and youthful, if I may say so, panel. We have the Most Reverend William Skylstad. He's a retired bishop of the Archdiocese of Spokane, Washington, and an American prelate of the Catholic Church. Currently, he's been offering presentations on healing, addressing old age in our lives. For several years, he's been invited by the local medical school to share with the second-year medical students how to handle old age and explore more practical related issues. He's 89 years young, going strong and actively serving the elderly community in the Catholic Church. So welcome, Bishop Bill. We also have with us Suzanne Ferguson. She served as a Catholic school teacher and school psychologist and home tutor in her early professional career. She joined the faculty at the University of Dayton, Department of Teacher Education in 1990, and remained as a professor in that department for 30 years. Suzanne retired from the University of Dayton in 2020 and continues to work there as a spiritual director, retreat leader, and strategic planning facilitator. She will soon conclude training to serve as a life coach as well. She's currently serving on several commissions, boards, and committees related to the Marianist Mission and Dayton area social service organizations. Suzanne, welcome. So Dr. Harry Dudley is also with us. He was the first to hold the role of Assistant Director for Certification of Ecclesial Ministry for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the USCCB, in the Secretariat for Catholic Education. He is on the staff to the Bishops' Committee on Catholic Education for several years now. He has served as a catechetical leader in 4 dioceses and is a member of National Association for Lay Ministries Advocacy Committee and on committees of the Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition. He retired in 2018 from USCCB, and he has since focused on helping nonprofits and churches develop curriculum, leaders, and formation for service. Dr. Dudley, welcome to our Ethos program. And then we have our local touch. We have Selwyn Bhajan. He's a practicing lifestyle and longevity living coach here in Trinidad and Tobago. He served as the Corporate Human Resources Manager at one of the largest state corporations in the Caribbean. After retiring, he has focused on developmental and educational programs, retreats, training of community leaders, life coaches, and counselors through his own company, Advanced Human Development Associates. One such program is called the Art of Human Blossoming. At the young age of 73, he pursued studies in mind-body medicine, lifestyle and longevity medicine, and cognitive behavior therapy at Harvard Medical School. Selwyn, welcome. And last but not least, we have Sister Angela Ann Zukowski, who really is part Trinbagonian, and she's no stranger to our team. She's been visiting us here in the Caribbean many years, assisting in developing Catholic communications in the region. She is the director of University of Dayton's Institute for Pastoral Initiatives and the Virtual Learning Community for Faith Formation. Sister Angela Ann is also the co-producer of this show, Ethos, and it is thanks to her work, not only behind the scenes, but also on camera, that we can meet all these knowledgeable panelists. So I really, in reading this out, I must say I feel very blessed to be seated among so many wise brothers and sisters, and even a Bishop Emeritus. So welcome to all. So Bishop Skylstad, we cannot escape aging. That's just a fact. No matter what we do, there is no fountain of youth out there. Yet it's still difficult to handle. Our physical and mental capacities are not the same as when we were younger. So how do we face this?
It's interesting as we look at our culture, society, I think, all over the world, there's a tendency to see an increased aging population for obvious reasons. And I think as we look to this aging process in ourselves personally, first of all, for me, it's really necessary to zero in on faith and to be mindful of how we need to process our lives by looking back and seeing how our faith life has touched us, how here and now, right now, as a faithful person, how God continues to touch me. And then finally, looking forward to the future where I need to be mindful of what is yet to come. That's, of course, something very mysterious, and yet the promise of the Lord we know will be fulfilled. The second thing I would say that's really important for us to remember as we age is to remember the trajectory of life, that we begin young and energetic, and we move through old age as we continue to develop and mature. But then at a certain age, things begin to slow down, and we become more and more limited. That is just life. And we need to be mindful of how it's important for us to remember that trajectory that eventually leads us to the kingdom of God. So to keep in mind always that trajectory, even though as we get into the later stages of life, in some ways that becomes really quite challenging for us. And the third thing I would mention with regard to looking where we at is how we need to be mindful of the humility that we have. I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, the first time I used a cane. That was a struggle. I said, oh my God, what are they going to think of this old bishop going around now with a cane? I don't know why I thought that was crazy, of course. But once I used it for a day or so, it was all gone. That was it. Same thing when I used a scooter. And so to look at those limitations in life that we have, we do so with a great sense of humility and not allow ourselves to be fixated by any particular moment or difficulty or tragedy or whatever it might be. I think it's really important for us to keep a sense of perspective and balance as we continue to age.
Beautiful. Wonderful. I had an old aunt who, instead of a cane, she had an umbrella. And we always were wondering, why would she use an umbrella in the dry season? But it was really her cane. So Sister Angela Ann has often referred to the elderly as the wisdom community. Older people are often not as physically active and may have more time to pray. Suzanne, in your role as a spiritual director and interacting with older men and women, do you get a sense that their spiritual life has changed? And is it a time when they are re-evaluating what communion with God is all about?
Thanks, Natasha. Yes, I agree. Many older folks believe their spiritual life has changed. There was an interview with Sister Joyce Rupp, and she quoted Evelyn Underhill's definition of the spiritual life. She said, It's the spiritual life is the life in which all one does comes from the center. The spiritual life deepens for many elders, and they better understand their center, their soul, and what's needed for growth. I think in my experiences, elders are drawn to their centers for a variety of reasons, but three kind of came to mind. One, as Bishop already stated, those physical changes are very common. And there's, because of that, though, because of slowing down, there's more time for reflection and contemplation. And they still want to be part of life. They want to be vibrant. And so then a lot of them start reading about self-care. But interestingly, as they think about good health and nutrition and exercise, all of a sudden, mental health, all of a sudden, oh, and there's my spiritual health as well. So I often hear folks ask questions like, well, why am I still here? And what am I still called to do? I think these are great questions. And realizing that physical diminishment actually can shed light on reasons for being here. And also mental acuity. So a lot of folks talk, and I myself know that my memory for past details and the tasks I have to do today kind of, not quite as good as it once was. So I think for me and for many others that I've experienced, so then we try to think about, well, what are the memories of my life? What were the ups and downs? And we realize that God has helped us in many places, both in our challenging times and in the times that we celebrate. So I think sometimes looking back on our lives and trying to draw upon those memories help those of us who are older to understand how God played such an important part in our life. And I think a third factor would be relationships. I think relationships really help us to live from our center, because now there's more time for family, for friends, for getting together. And I think we deepen our relationship as elders. We can talk in greater depth about what has happened and what our challenges have been, what our gifts are. And I think there's a sense of greater authenticity of who we are. We don't have to put up as much of a facade. And I think that really helps. And then finally, your question about reevaluating communion with God. I think when we look back on our accomplishments in life and the diminishments of body and memory, loss of loved ones, as Pope Francis noted, sometimes I hear people say, well, I'm looking forward to my time after this life because I want to reunite with my parents or the generations before me, my aunts and uncles. And I think sometimes I recall their words of wisdom to me, but I also, and again, friends and clients as well, think, you know what? And there are memories that I have that I want to share about how to live my life. So I think for elders, there are words of gratitude and of wisdom. And many of us want to share what those words are because we want to share it with the generations to come and admit our desire to commune with our God and to deliver Christ's message.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. So, we're hearing memories, being in touch with yourself and with those around you in relationships. And Selwyn, as a life coach and counselor, I know you meet persons from all walks of life and all faith backgrounds. What beliefs about aging do you have? And do these beliefs increase or hinder a person's ability to experience more passion, engagement, and joy of life?
Well, life has seasons. That's a fact of life. There are seasons. Early childhood, adolescence, the young adult, going to school, tertiary level education, professionalism, family life, contributing to the community in a civil way, and of course what we call retirement, but I like to call it the age of legacy. That's where you look back at your journey and what you were leaving, what you took, and so on. So it's beautiful, but there are seasons, and a lot of people don't recognize that you could be in fullness in each season. The relationship with God is the same, and God is forming and guiding on all levels. But we should be full in each season. So sometimes people say, well, when I retire, I will do that. But then you're not able to do that in retirement or in the legacy season, in that wisdom season. So yeah, this is what I try to do with the people I'm working with, regardless of your educational background or even your religion. Enjoy the fullness of the season, and the enjoyment means an awareness of God's presence and God's guidance, awareness of yourself and your talents and your interests and call in life, and living the fullness in each season of life. And this is what I found to be incredible. Now, just a couple of years ago, when at the age of 73, I decided to go to Harvard Medical School because I believe in lifelong learning. So that's another stream that has to be there, that life is about lifelong learning and growing and blossoming. So at Harvard, we were taught about longevity living. And I heard Susan talk about it, and Father spoke about it. Yes, in longevity living, there are things we do. The scientific community at places like Harvard determine that there are certain things that you do in every phase of life: relationship, spirituality, the cultivation of solitude and silence, the way you take care of your body, how you eat. So this is the work that I've been doing, and I'm finding it a great joy. Now I'm working with community leaders, trying to bring this knowledge home to them so that they can work with all these different seasons or life seasons in their community. So life is a beautiful thing if we see it as a continuous pilgrimage to grow in communion with God, a pilgrimage to become one with God in many ways, according to the dynamics of each season. A child knows God as parent, so to speak. So in each season, we are growing and we're learning and experiencing and enjoying life. And enjoying does not mean just being attached to furtive, transient, pleasure-centric things, but to deep and important things. And in every phase, one of the things that I find fascinating and enjoyable to share with others is that in every stage we should be giving. And who can give more than the elderly? All the years of wisdom and experiences, challenges, and growing, we should be giving all the way through. But in the what we call the elderly or old age, there's so much we can give. We can give to our children, our grandchildren, our communities, just share, uplift, inspire, encourage. But the elderly has a privilege of giving more, which is fascinating, because you give more love, more ideas, more experiences, more insight. So that's to my mind the beautiful thing of the wisdom age.
The wisdom season. Thank you very much, Selwyn. Dr. Dudley, amongst the various groups you have engaged in, what are some of the wisdom opportunities and challenges emerging from the conversations?
Well, one thing is, I like Selwyn, I believe not just in lifelong learning, but lifelong serving. I keep looking for new opportunities. And I agree with Pope Francis that whenever we walk with those on the margins, we have great opportunities for shared wisdom. You know, my most recent experience is bi-weekly Lectio Divina sessions with women and men prisoners in our local jail. We recall at each session that no matter what we may have done, still important for them to recall this, we still belong to the family of God. And together we remained his daughters and sons. So I continue to find incredible wisdom opportunities when we realize together that we're capable of doing so much more by supporting one another in communities of shared practice and whatever our ministry may be. I find we need to focus together on the Lord who calls us not to look to the wind and waves in our lives, but to him. And we face many winds and waves as we get older. So there is so much more in our lives as disciples than the limits with which we struggle with. And yes, even then the mistakes we've made, as long as we learn from them. So we have gifts and insights to share from our life experiences. And if we remain open to the wisdom of others' experiences, we also have much to learn, especially when we are willing to listen to one another's stories. Regarding challenges, I might also call them temptations. There's two that come to mind. The first temptation is to focus on the past and to focus on what we have come to believe we can no longer do. To look to our limits, again, I would say at the wind and waves, like Peter in the gospel coming up this coming Sunday, when we're called to walk on the water rather than looking at the Lord who calls us. In aging, we can forget there are also much more than the limits with which we are struggling. Like prisoners I meet with each week, we struggle when we forget that we are so much more than that worst thing or worst limit we're facing and the limits we may be dealing with. We need to focus on the present because God continues to call us and to take up our cross and follow him by offering what gifts we do have to bring light to others. We elderly, like the prisoners I meet with each week, need to realize that God is still very much interested in reaching out to us and through us. I always remind those in the jail, don't forget to be a light to other prisoners when you leave our section. So a second challenge and temptation is to restrict ourselves, allowing ourselves to become marginalized by remaining only with those who are our own age or who agree with us. We need to engage and be willing to both mentor and to learn from the young, as well as those who disagree with us. I believe this is happening in the church right now because of the synodal process we're in the midst of. For example, I have found that volunteers and chaplains who minister in jails and prisons and detention centers can become as marginalized as those with whom they minister. They need community and opportunities for shared wisdom. I had previously learned the same when training catechists and catechetical leaders. This is why just before I retired that I helped to gather bishops and leaders from national organizations that serve those marginalized and incarcerated communities to provide ongoing support, resources, formation opportunities, and community for chaplains and volunteers, as well as advocacy to address what we encounter in our ministry. I continue to work with that organization that we formed in 2018. It's called the Catholic Prison Ministries Association, and our website is www.catholicprisonministries.org. Perhaps I could share more about that organization another time. My points here, though, is the best way to address so many challenges or temptations we face in aging is through forming communities of care, listening and accompanying one another in this lifelong journey of discipleship. In this way, those being served can also have opportunities to serve and to have a say in addressing their needs.
Wonderful. Dr. Dudley, thank you. I love that, the winds and waves of life. So I'm going to take that. I'll give you all full credit. Don't worry about that. So we must be willing. I think what every panelist is saying so far is a quote from Joseph Campbell. We must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. And it's there in our Bible in Jeremiah 29:11, one of my favorite passages. For I know well the plans I have in mind for you, plans for your welfare, not for woe, so as to give you a future of hope. But as we get older, it's really not so easy to accept change. It's not easy any time in life, but even as we get older, because we have to give up what we're accustomed to. Although the pandemic did thrust that on us, about change and getting with it. But Sister Angela Ann, as an active member of what you call the wisdom community, what have those adaptations been like for you?
Well, thank you very much. Listening to everyone's wonderful comments really summarizes what I would say. I think that coming out of during the COVID experience, we learned to slow down and to begin to pay attention to the world around us, the environment around us, and most important, to one another as persons in our families. We're not passing like ships in the night, but we're becoming attentive to one another. And I think that as we move and grow in the wisdom community, our awareness is there. And the rest of the community, our rest of our faith community, are given an opportunity to listen to those stories that the wisdom community have to share. Because all too often it's too late when we often say, I wish I would have asked this question. I wish they would have told me this story. So this is the time of the wisdom years to share our stories and to document those stories, to pass them on to the next generation.
Thank you very much for that. I love the document our stories, because we ought to have, as we grow older, a little more time to do that. So I love that. Thank you for that. In Sister Janet Schaeffler's book on Let This Be the Time, she puts it nicely. Many people mention how the awareness of getting older crept up on them. The journey of aging is a gift for each eldering person and a challenge for all of us together. Richard Rohr reminds us that in the second half of life, we have three options: to be the pathetic old fool, the embittered old fool, or the holy old fool. So which journey will we take? Because of God's promise, are we empowered to embrace the journey of eldering toward a future full of hope? So Bishop Bill, I'm putting it on you. Which journey should we take?
Well, thank you, Natasha. I would like to think that the journey would be the holy old fool. We're all journeying in life, and to say that too, as we think about that, there's something about that the old fool that has some energy about it that I find uplifting and positive. It's good as we come to these later years in our lives to continue to process our lives. We all have our unique journeys of great joys and happiness, but also it's been tough. It's been kind of downers, and how we place that perspective as we continue to move along and appreciate the trajectory of our lives, as I mentioned at the beginning. By the way, at my last place of residence was for elderly folks. I'm now in assisted living here at Providence Emily Court. But there's a cartoon on the wall about the wheels of life. And it started off with a baby carriage. It went to a tricycle, to a bicycle, to a motorcycle, to a sports car, to the family van, to the wheelchair, and finally the last picture is a hearse, the wheels of life. That's where we are in terms of the trajectory as we move along. And to be mindful of that in terms of appreciation of how God has moved us onward through our lives. So often as we reflect on our lives, as we look at the cumulative view of that, how we have been blessed in so many ways. I see that constantly in my own life, of times I've gone through even periods of some years of real challenge, but to look back upon that and say, oh my God, what a blessing, as I look back upon it. What a blessing and what a grace. The second thing, and as several of you have mentioned that, the spirituality that we have as we address our older age. It's one thing to be really vibrant and alive in our old age, but part of that reality for at least some of the folks is a lot of suffering and pain and loss of memory, for example, dementia or Alzheimer's. That's a real struggle for people, and to be mindful of that as we look to ourselves and prepare ourselves for whatever comes, to remind ourselves of the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The suffering and dying of Jesus, which refers to us in our daily living of taking up your cross every day and following me. Sometimes that when the rubber really hits the road, me personally, that is tough. Both my sense of faith and my spirituality, I can look to the future then with a great deal of sense and of hopefulness. The third thing I'd like to say is the need for socialization, to keep up friendships. That has two aspects to it. Pope Francis, you remember, I think just a few weeks ago, didn't we have a day for grandparents? And he really focuses a lot on the elderly people. Please don't forget them. On the other hand, for us as elderly people, we also need to take the initiative. We don't allow ourselves to become solitary in our lives. We need to reach out in relationships. We need to be present to one another as we journey in faith. So the fact that we have constant contact with one another is really very important. I find that especially true here as I continue to live amongst the some 60 residents, men and women, a few priests, 7 or 8 sisters, wonderful group of people. So what a blessing that has been. The great gift of gratitude that we need to have for the journey that we have taken. Remember Sister Jean from, she's a chaplain of the Ramblers at Loyola University in Chicago. She's 102 years old.
Wow.
What a dynamo she is. And you know, in a certain sense, we old folks have a chance to evangelize as well. I'd like to look at her mission as evangelizing. I saw a lady reporter interviewing her, and the reporter obviously was very excited about what she saw and what she experienced in the interview. So then the final thing I would say, just to be grateful for our lives, whatever they are. Gratitude. Give thanks always, as St. Paul says. Give thanks always. Yes. Indeed. Wonderful. Thank you, Lord, and thanks everyone else.
Yes. Thank you so much, Bishop Bill. You know, that day of grandparents brought a smile to my face because on that day, my mom was demanding her special treatment as a grandparent. So, Suzanne, what last words you have for us as we wrap up? Because you two talked about physical changes and the importance of relationships. What do you have to say?
I think to take what our challenges in our body and mind and see them as invitations to the soul, and to see this time as one of grace, gratitude, and giving to God and others, and as Pope Francis reminds us, to creation.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Selwyn, which journey should we take?
Well, it's not an old fool, it's an old pool of wisdom. So I think it's a lovely period in life when you can contemplate and relax and share. But as Susan said, it's a time to celebrate grace, to be filled with grace within, and to share this grace through love and compassion and giving and sharing. So it's a time to be in grace and to celebrate and to radiate grace.
Wonderful. Thank you. To walk on that water and forget the winds and waves, right, Dr. Dudley?
That's it.
So tell us what you have to say as we wrap up.
That's right. I would say, you know, I think we need to be open to the challenges that life faces us at this season. And as someone said, well, be grateful for the opportunities they provide us, and be willing to always to be seeking new ways to serve with whatever limits we face.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Dudley. Sister, we want to end with you because you talked about documenting, and in a way, this is what we're doing in a virtual space. We're documenting, you know, our experiences as we age. So what do you have to say as we wrap up?
Well, I think that that's the point that I would like to bring about. It's the storytelling and the sharing of images. You know, we have so many beautiful pictures of family and friends and life experiences. Now is the opportunity to pick those pictures up and to just simply sit down with one another, celebrate one another in gratitude. And if we're young, let's reach out to those who are in the wisdom years. They have a great stories to share, and no matter what age we are. So I think that that's really important. And also, if anyone wants to know more about this whole idea about spiritual and aging, we have a program online, an e-seminar on spirituality and aging on the VLCFF you may want to participate in.
Thank you, sister. So thank you to all our panelists. The journey of aging is different for each person. So hopefully our view of and appreciation for the journey deepens each day as we listen not only to our own lives, but we listen to the experience of others. So I thank you so much for joining us on Ethos, and we'll see you again.